Sir Morgan Freeman is back in a new film, and I got a lot of thoughts about it. So let's jump into the review of that film right now. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel today for another review. And today we're going to be reviewing the film The Minute You Wake Up Dead, which is going to be in theaters, on demand, and digital November 4th. So this is an independent film, and you know, most times in promotion of independent films there's always a big name attached to it, you know, the likes of Bruce Willis, and in this case Morgan Freeman. And you know, I enjoy them because you know, regardless of the production and the budget, you know, we know these actors are going to show up one way or another. And then sometimes you fall on some really good films, sometimes you fall on some films that got some potential but not all the way quite there. And this is a film that's really right there in the middle for me. I think first off, the production is super solid, the acting is super solid, and I also think that the story told in this is interesting. There's a lot of twists and turns, so I enjoyed the story. I guess my only thing I was a little reserved on was you know, sometimes the toning a little bit. You know, this felt like it could be a very serious film at times, but then other times it felt kind of campy. I think the best way to describe this film, which is kind of like, I'm kind of a hypocrite here because I love Deadly Women. If you know what I'm talking about, if you know, you know. And this feels like a long extended version of an episode of Deadly Women to the utmost. Even a character, who I'm not going to name, is literally a story right outside of any episode of Deadly Women. And I enjoyed that. I really did. And for whatever reason, Deadly Women can fit in 3 stories within an hour. And this one just took one of the 3 stories and extended it to an hour and a half. So I enjoyed it for that. But at the same time too, if you've seen Deadly Women, you know it also has that side of the campiness to it, the, you know, the exaggeration and whatnot. And that's what this kind of had as well too. So like, you know, I didn't overly love this film, but I definitely didn't hate it. You know, I thought it was just a very solid film that I think if anybody who loves a good murder mystery, who you truly can't trust no characters in this, like none. And you could be suspicious of all of them, but by the end of the story, you know, you never know who's going to put a knife in whose back. And I thought that was the enjoyable factor of this film, is that it was really well written, with a lot of twists and turns, and just the characters that you just did not know who to trust. And even characters that really appeared to be like, oh, that's definitely going to be a bad person, you just never really knew. Because at the end of the day, when there's money involved and everyone's desperate for it, anybody is willing to go to any lengths to get that check. With that being said, you have Jaimie Alexander as Delaney. You have Darren Mann as Lucius. Darren Mann, who I was really high on the film back in 2020 called In Battle. Good to see him back in a prominent film, and his character is definitely unhinged. He's giving you sort of the unpredictable wild card, potential hothead, somebody you can't trust, but can you trust? You know, and his performance in this, especially some of the scenes where he let's just say he's on the bad end of things, and him really kind of making you squinch a little bit by his screaming and other little bit of mannerisms. Oh man, he has some moments here. You have Morgan Freeman as Sheriff Fowler. Now he's investigating the murders that are happening in town, and you know, Morgan Freeman is gonna do what he does, but there's one thing I always really love about Morgan Freeman, and that's his narration. Yep, we got some narration from Morgan, you know, that really can build up any scene, even if he's not in it. Just his voice alone can elevate things. And then you have Ben Vandermeer, who plays Officer Tillman, who's my favorite character in this because he happens to be the one who got the most common sense, if you ask me. It seems like he had it figured out from the beginning, and I was like, hey, I can get with that. And your main star is Cole Hauser from Yellowstone, who plays Russ. Now Russ, oh man, it's a guy that kind of got into this little insurance ring, and it all starts to become a scam, and you know, and with his next door neighbor, and things ain't go the way he needed it to. So now somebody's after him because they're like, hey, you owe me money. He don't have the money. It's a lot of different things kind of going on, and he has to look over his shoulder every turn because he keep getting these sort of anonymous calls from somebody asking, the minute you it's not what they say. Actually, they say, where will you be the minute you wake up dead? And that has him like, what the heck does that mean? And then a murder happens, and he starts to think that the murder was intended for him, and now he's just overly paranoid. And that's where we get Sheriff Fowler investigating, trying to put the pieces of the puzzle to figure out who is after Russ, and Russ is trying to stay low and out the way. But as I said in the beginning, there's so many twists and turns from Russ to Delaney to Lucius, everybody, and there's some other characters I haven't named that you just sit back and say, like, who is behind the calls, and who's behind the murders, and who is really, you know, what's one's intentions? Because everybody, as I said, you never know at any given point that somebody could be after the next person. But I did give away one of the major things in this, and I had to, because it really does feel like the toning of that series. And yeah, Deadly Women. If you've seen that series, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I mean, there is a character that's literally a page out of an episode of there. And as I mentioned, from the wine, from the insurance fraud, and the ramifications of insurance fraud, looking to collect, all those sorts of different things are kind of happening here. And as I mentioned, the very core nucleus of all of this is that people are desperate, especially when it comes to financial situations. Like, you just never know what somebody may do. But with that being said, too, like I said, the thing for me is that it's an independent film, a low budget, and you can tell, and obviously it would be nitpicking if I was to sick out, pretty much point out the little things I was able to pick up on. But they really did have a very solid production. The cast really came together and really made this work. All these characters, all the actors really breathed life into their characters, and they're very much and that's how you kind of want to have your characters. You want to have your characters almost like pawns, because you want to kind of like in a game of Clue, you kind of want to be suspicious of these characters to kind of figure out who is behind what, and what is going to be the next person's next move, and who's, like, again, who's the murderer, who's next, all these sorts of different things. And it's so many twists and turns, and at the end of the day, you're just going to be stroking your chin, wondering like, and maybe you might pick it out early and decide who it's going to be. But I think by the end of the film, I think you may not exactly suspect exactly how it's all going to play out. One other thing I will say is that in the beginning of the film, there's a scene that happens, and I was kind of like, what? And that scene does come back full circle towards the end of the film. So it's like one of those things where they show a scene that happens later on in the event of things that they showed early, and then it happens again. In this case, it really threw me off, because I was just kind of like, where does this all fit in at? And especially when you're introduced to like what's really the dilemma of the film. You know, I was kind of still trying to figure out, like, how do we get to this point? But eventually you do, and then, you know, it all sort of comes full circle and works out. So again, this is the film The Minute You Wake Up Dead. It's going to be in theaters, on demand, digital, November 4th. I thought this film was solid. I think if you're looking for a good murder mystery that, you know, doesn't be, at times it feels like it wants to be very serious, but the moment it does, it is kind of a little reeled back with the campiness, and definitely some over exaggeration of things, and maybe some events that are just completely a little bit of a head scratcher. But overall, I completed the film by saying, you know what, that's not bad. I enjoyed that. I definitely enjoyed that. I love the story and the mystery aspect to it, and it definitely kept me guessing the entire time. So, but yeah, check it out, folks. Jump in the comments, let me know your thoughts about it, and as always, stay tuned for more reviews very soon.